Hey, Rose here from Pain Free Freedom. I am super excited that you're here. So we're going to start off with deep diving into what is the pain cycle and what is the role of childhood in that pain cycle. So if you're new here, basically the pain cycle is when your brain and nervous system are stuck in a pain loop, where basically your brain keeps telling you that there's something broken or wrong in your body, either through muscle tension or through pain or other symptoms like fatigue or anxiety. And so the pain cycle is when your brain and nervous system are shifted in this place where they no longer feel safe and they start actually reacting to stress with physical sensations. So you're probably wondering, okay, how did this happen, right? How did my brain and nervous system go from this place of feeling safe to feeling unsafe? Which brings us to the role of childhood. So for some people, you might identify as having experienced some childhood trauma. For a lot of people that have this kind of pain, they might not necessarily think of themselves as someone who has experienced trauma. So I want to unpack this word, right? When we hear the word trauma, we think of something huge, right? And so many people that I work with, and for me in my journey, there is this element of, but it could have been worse, right? So when we're thinking about what experiences we had, we want to view them through the lens of your nervous system. And your brain and nervous system are designed for survival, right? They are designed to keep you safe. And so when you're thinking about how was my experience growing up, it is not about, okay, no one maybe had the perfect childhood, but what were those cues where my brain and nervous system might have started learning that I maybe wasn't safe or maybe wasn't loved, seen, heard. There are 5 big roots for a lot of people that have these sorts of symptoms. One of them is anxiety. Another, feeling unsafe, unloved, perfectionism, suppressed anger. And for some, there's less of an emotional root. It's simply that your body has some sort of accident, and then even though your body is healing, you still experience those symptoms. So what's happening there? Why are some people having a trigger, whether it's an emotional or a physical trigger, and then they are able to overcome it, right? They heal, they're fine. And for others of us, it becomes something that's chronic. So what's happening here is really getting back to that role of how safe did you feel? How safe did you feel psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually when you were growing up? And that has actually primed your nervous system to be in this space of shifting either into a pain cycle where it does become chronic. You have that triggering event, and then this pain cycle gets started where maybe it started from a physical or an emotional event. And then as you feel a sensation, what happens? You start feeling like something's wrong in your body. You start going to a lot of doctors. And for a lot of us, we end up finding more or less there's no big reason why we're in pain. But a lot of us have really scary moments. A lot of us are wondering if there's something really wrong with our bodies, right? And that anxiety, when you combine it with the role of childhood, if you experienced something that made you feel unsafe, or maybe you just didn't feel like you fit in, or maybe you felt like it was hard for you to connect with others, right? When we think about that childhood component, we want to really unpack what are the things that led me to feel like I was safe, loved, connected, and what are the things that maybe made me feel not so safe and loved and connected. And when we can recognize that priming, right, that we've experienced through childhood, you'll start noticing that there may be some patterns there that are hearkening back to that time. So when something happens now, it's triggering not just what's happening in this moment, but it's really triggering a pattern that happened far back in our childhood. So if you're thinking of this for yourself, maybe you do recognize that you had some significant trauma. And if that is you, I want to send you so much love in this moment. Maybe you're thinking, hey, my childhood wasn't that bad. So I want to invite you to just think about what are some of the things that might have led your nervous system to feel, maybe I'm not 100% safe, right? Maybe feeling a little unsafe, a little unworthy. Maybe your parents divorced when you were young, right? Maybe there was a move. And so when you start to look at your childhood through this lens of what was my brain and nervous system learning during this time about how safe I was, you can start uncovering what are some of the things that might be keeping you in that pain cycle now. So not everyone that is in a pain cycle did experience trauma. It's a different path for everyone. But when we can understand what things might have primed our system to start feeling unsafe, it can shed a lot of light on what we need to shift to be able to come back into this place of connecting into the body and ultimately able to turn those pain signals off. So I'd like to open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to toss those in now. Someone shares literally having an anxiety attack now and pain is off the charts. Yeah. So your brain processes physical and emotional pain in the same place. So when you're having that peak of anxiety, it will also amplify the pain signals in the brain. So the beautiful thing about this is when you notice that there's such a strong connection between what I'm feeling emotionally and the level of pain I'm in, it gives you that confidence to know the same way that your brain and nervous system over time decided that things were unsafe, right, through that childhood lens, and then that triggering event that might have been physical or emotional, the same way that your body got into this place of experiencing this pain cycle, you also have the power to be able to rewire your brain and nervous system out of that cycle. So sending you lots of love in this moment. I know it's hard. Just keep telling yourself and keep knowing deeply that it is temporary and it will pass. Let me know what other questions you guys have around the role of childhood in the pain cycle and any other questions that you have about the pain cycle. And in the meantime, I'm going to go a little bit deeper on some of the different roots that can be from that childhood place. Nadine asked, what do you think of extinction burst? Yeah, thanks. So an extinction burst, basically when you're dealing with a pain cycle, you can think of yourself as I am laying in these new neural pathways in my brain and nervous system. And these are the pathways of safety. So every thought you think, every emotion you have, every physical sensation is a neural pathway being lit up in your brain. And when you're in a pain cycle, that neural pathway to pain, anxiety, fear, fixation becomes like a superhighway. And the road to love, connection, joy, rest, digest becomes a dirt road. And so when you're doing this work, it's really about laying down those new neural pathways, those pain-free pathways, and reactivating old pain-free pathways. And when you talk about an extinction burst, it's somewhat common for people who are recovering from the pain cycle, mind-body, TMS, to have this moment where they've had a decrease in symptoms, right? They've done the work, they've done the brain retraining, they've started getting into a place of more safety in their brain, their body, their nervous system. Maybe they've done some emotional reprocessing, and then they'll have a flare of symptoms. And in that moment, although it feels scary, it's really your brain and nervous system just having this shift back into those old patterns. So all you need to do when you're in one of those extinction bursts, if you already have the tools that you need to be able to get back out of that pain cycle, is really just to lean into the tools that you know work for you. So these are things like mindfulness, somatic tracking, pain reprocessing therapy. For some people, it's a very body-focused way. For some people, it's a very emotional approach. And for others, there's also this element of your analytical mind. Because when you can understand what is science-backed, what's going on in my brain and my nervous system, it starts to decrease the fear of those sensations. And even when you have sensations, when you know they're going to pass, they no longer have that weight of having it be a chronic thing. And so when that extinction burst happens, you know that you'll have the confidence to be able to come out the other side of that. Thanks for the question. Awesome. Yes, if you cannot catch this live, there will be a replay, so feel free to check that out, and I hope that your child goes to bed easily. So to jump back into what are some of those roles of the childhood, one of the things that we may experience is feeling unloved or unsafe. And so when we start to feel unloved or unsafe, this could be something that happens within our family unit. This could be something that happens at school, right? But when we start to feel that like social anxiety, or maybe we're not feeling fully accepted, your brain and your nervous system, this is really a survival response, right? Because if you think about evolutionarily over time, we are wired to survive. And one of the ways that we have been wired to survive is by finding social connection. So anytime that you felt like an outsider, you didn't feel seen, heard, loved, connected, your brain can start to interpret that as, hey, this is actually a survival problem. And as it tilts into that survival mode, that is where you can be primed to be in a pain cycle later on. Another element is suppressed anger. So this was a big one for me. And honestly, I did not think that I had anger until I started doing this emotional reprocessing work. So when we have anger in childhood, you might observe that anger is explosive. Maybe someone in your family exploded in anger, yelled, threw things, and you might have internalized at a conscious or subconscious level that, hey, anger is actually really dangerous. And if it comes up in me, it's not a tolerable emotion. And so you'll start to subconsciously suppress it. So for some people, it's because they saw anger in an explosive way. For others, they didn't see anger modeled at all. And so they learned, hey, if anger comes up, it's not an appropriate emotion. I can't have it. And they also subconsciously suppressed this. And that suppressed anger is a very common root for people to have when they feel these sorts of emotions come up. If it's intolerable, your brain will actually send physical symptoms so that you essentially can suppress that emotion more effectively. Another root is feeling anxious. So this is also something that is highly picked up in childhood, right? Depending on the mindset of the people around you. Maybe you had family members that struggled with anxiety or depression, and whatever your brain is observing will start a pattern for that in yourself. So when you find yourself in that place of feeling like, hey, I worry a lot, I'm thinking about the future a lot, I'm ruminating about the future a lot, I'm ruminating about the past a lot. When you have this emotional pain pattern, these negative thought loops, this is actually processed in the same part of your brain as physical pain. So if you have these sort of negative thought loops, this anxiety, over time, if you build up enough stress, or perhaps a particularly stressful thing happens in your life, it can flip your nervous system from being like, okay, things are pretty much safe, to thinking things are unsafe. And so that history of anxiety or feeling like you're ruminating in the future or the past plays a big role in how you experience when a triggering event happens and whether or not that becomes chronic. And let me know if anybody else has any questions. Feel free to toss those in the chat. So those are a few of the big roots that I worked through and that I help clients work through in terms of getting out of pain. So it is not just about saying to yourself, like, okay, I forgive everyone in childhood, everyone did the best that they could, but really allowing yourself to have your authentic emotional experience of that. Because sure, there were things that were great, but maybe there were things that weren't. And allowing yourself to express that anger, any guilt, any shame, any of those heavier emotions, and then allowing yourself to reprocess those in a way where it allows the emotion to release from your body, where your body feels like, okay, if there's a big emotion, I don't have to trap it, I don't have to hold it, I can simply allow it to flow through me. And as you do this reprocessing work, it's really what shifts your brain and nervous system out of that pain cycle back into a place of feeling secure, connected. And so at the end of the day, whether you experienced trauma, whether you would identify that way, or whether you did not, thinking through what are the different aspects of my experience up until this point, as far back as childhood and any experiences that you've had here, thinking about what are those things where I felt safe, and maybe what are some of those things where I did not feel safe. And when you understand that, you might also start noticing that you might have been having symptoms longer than you thought you did. So this is really common, right? For people with pain, we often have a history of other sorts of symptoms. These are also caused by your nervous system being in this dysregulated place. So for me and some of the people I work with, I had a history of nausea when I was younger. I would always get nauseous at night. I had headaches in my early 20s. And then that's really where the pain journey started for me. So as you look back over childhood, you may start noticing that you were experiencing some symptoms, whether they were physical pain, unexplained GI issues, fatigue, anxiety. You'll start noticing that sometimes this might have been playing a role for you in terms of your nervous system feeling unsafe, being in that pain cycle for longer than you might be thinking. All right, any other questions? Nadine, does being indifferent to the symptoms help rewire? Yeah, so indifference is basically being agnostic to the symptoms being there or not, where if there's a symptom in your body, instead of feeling fearful, focusing on it, you really come at it from this perspective of, okay, there's this sensation, I know it's there, I know that I'm not causing damage to my body, I know that it's simply my brain and nervous system sending me a signal, and ultimately it's a false alarm, right? My brain is trying to tell me something's dangerous, where in actuality I'm safe or safe enough in this moment and it's fine. So you do want to practice being indifferent to the symptoms. So when sensations do come up, you're able to observe them without identifying with them. So at the same time, you do want to focus on that indifference, whether the sensations are there or not. It's still safe for you. But you also want to make sure that you have the tools and support to be able to do the work, ultimately to be free from this pain cycle, right? So whatever tools or support you need to be able to do that, you want to focus on how do I do the work to get myself out of this pain cycle? And then how do I also hold this indifference and self-compassion? Because I know I'm not going to do this perfectly. And I can tell you right now, in the role of healing, it is not perfect, right? Everyone has a slightly different route to breaking free from that pain cycle because everyone had a slightly different route to getting in it in the first place. So you do want to practice being agnostic to your symptoms, but you also want to attune to your body, because if your body is sending you a symptom, your brain is sending you a danger signal. And so you want to balance, when am I indifferent? So I say the sensations are there, okay, it's fine, I'm going to keep going. And when is your body really trying to tell you that something is there, right? Maybe it's fear, maybe it's unsafety, maybe it's unworthiness, maybe it's anxiety, but there's that root that your brain is kind of demanding that you attend to. So you do want to practice being indifferent, but also make space to allow yourself that emotional expression and reprocessing to be able to release whatever root is causing that in the first place. Thanks for the question. All right. Any other questions while we're here? Also, tomorrow I am doing a Zoom event. And so we can actually meet face-to-face and talk face-to-face, which will be amazing. The link for that to join is at the link in my bio. So I'd love to see you guys there. And at the link in my bio, there is also a link to book a free consult with me. So if you're new to this pain journey, you're trying to figure out, like, what is my next step to actually feeling good in my body, I'd love to invite you to hop on a call there, and we can get you started in this process of going from this place of feeling fearful, fixated on the pain, to knowing that this pain is going to go away because it's simply your brain and nervous system, and then actually doing the work to reprocess those pain signals, to rewire your brain, get your nervous system in a calmed state, and then release whatever emotional pain is causing or fueling that symptom in the first place. All right. Any other questions coming up? So great to see you guys. I hope you have an amazing rest of the week, and I am looking forward to seeing you next Wednesday. All right. Bye.